Welcome to Black Queer and Call, the Queer Convo, sponsored by Rethink the Narrative and the EsteemAwards.com. I'm Derrick Tennial, and we are here to have a frank, honest, and authentic conversation about sexuality, spirituality, and everything in between. I want to thank the guests that we have this morning that have chosen to join us. Bishop Dr. Cedrick Bridgeforth, Dr. Kathi Martin Hunt, Minister Benjamin Carlton, Reverend Kevin Tindell, and Reverend Darlene Franklin. We are so pleased to have you this morning for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us for this conversation. So I'm going to jump right in. And Black, Queer, and Called. Back in the old church where I grew up, the old mothers would say, "Baby, that ain't God, that's gas." What are you called? Who are you? And what specifically are you called to do? I'll start with Bishop Dr. Cedrick Bridgeforth, and we'll go around from there. Dr. Bridgeforth, what are you called to do specifically? And describe your call experience. What does that mean? And what did that look like?
Yeah, thank you. I am Cedrick Bridgeforth, and I serve as a resident bishop in the Pacific Northwest region of the United States for the United Methodist Church. And I grew up in rural North Alabama and was reared primarily by my mother's side of the family, my maternal grandparents in particular. And the first sense I had about a call was when I was 9 or 10 years old, when I led a prayer in a youth service. And afterwards, my grandmother came and grabbed me by my face and said, "Boy, one day you're going to preach." And I went yelling and screaming, running out of the church saying, "I don't want to preach. I don't want to preach." But it was about 10 years later when I was serving in the United States Air Force and attending a good old New Kingdom Church of God in Christ in Cheyenne, Wyoming, that I began to sense a understanding of a call to ministry. And so to me, that just started the path for me trying to discern what that meant, because I did not see myself in the role of a pastor, but I felt that God had God's hand upon me to do something intentional around the a religious vocation. And so I started on an academic route and now find myself in a role that is quite fascinating, but I sense that my call has always been about helping individuals discover who they are, claim that identity, and live that out and connect in community and invite others to do the same.
Awesome. Dr. Kathi Hunt Martin, or Martin Hunt. I do that quite
My wife did that confusion. Don't blame me.
Tell us about who you are and your call experience.
Okay. Well, I'm Kathi Martin Hunt. I came into ministry, I guess, and it was in my blood in some way. I am a PK. I was born a child of the church, the AME church, parsonage. Lived in parsonages all my life. But something happened to me personally when I was like 4 years old. There was a connection I experienced with this spirit that I called God as my best friend growing up. And I have had that all of my life. And it's, when I think of myself as a spirit person, I believe that my awareness of who I am as a spirit person started at 4 years old. And as I grew up, and as you know, being a PK, you're in church all the time. But I grew up thinking a lot of what I was hearing didn't make a bit of sense. And so especially anything that was exclusive, just did not make sense in the context of the God that I knew. And as I grew, I did not want to have anything to do with the church. So I went to school on something technical coming out of high school. I decided to study engineering. Then I was going to work on what do you call it? MBA. And somehow I found myself in line in seminary. I don't know how that happened, but there was just this sense of call that there's something more for me to do, because if I really believed what I was hearing in many ways was hurting people, I felt a call to say something and do something that would be more helpful and would be more in line with the God of love and justice that I knew since I was little. So I followed that line to seminary, went to seminary, got ordained AME, did that for 7 years until I did a commitment ceremony for 2 women, and it felt better for me to go to the United Church of Christ, where I have been for the last 23 years. Now serving an online ministry that I started during the pandemic. That's called God, Self, and Neighbor Community. But I'm also serving at First Congregational Church in Atlanta.
Awesome. Thank you so very much for that. Minister Benjamin Carlton, tell us who you are. What was your call experience?
Great day, everyone. I don't have the strongest signal. I'm in Singapore right now, so if I go out, hopefully it will bring me back in. Similar to Reverend Kathy's story, have had a relationship with the divine since childhood. I didn't grow up in a religious family, but yet felt the urge to preach God to my friends in the neighborhood. I would gather, I say I did the first crate challenge because I would literally build a podium out of crates and then preach from it. I would read Genesis, and I would buy all of my friends snacks so they would listen to me preach, but they couldn't get the snacks to the end. So I had my preacher tactics and tricks and gimmicks since I was 5. But I am called specifically to be love, light, and laughter to any environment that I go into, whether it's on stage, in front of the camera, preaching, doing activism, engaging with youth, or just in business, being love, being light, being laughter, which I believe are the true elements of the divine that cross any religion and any spiritual practice.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you. Reverend Kevin Tindell.
Good morning to all. Uh, I am a product of the Church of God in Christ on both sides of the family, and grew up in a church that was all about love. It was more of a uh, middle class uh, Church of God in Christ, where you had a lot of professionals, teachers, people who worked in hospitals, those types of things. Our pastor had been Methodist before he came into the Church of God in Christ. And so we were the bishop's church that was in at 11:30 and out by 1:30. We didn't stay in church all day long, but it was a church of love. And I never felt um, that I was not wanted there. Even though as I grew into my sexuality, I knew that the doctrine said that it wasn't right, but I was still loved and still sit in that pulpit today when I'm home in that church and accepted. And so my call came, I went to school, did an accounting degree, did an MBA degree. Um, After all of that and working in business, uh, in consulting, heard a call when I was 33 that Jesus experienced. And it was a call. I had been working in justice uh, with justice organizations, not-for-profit organizations, and gender-loving organizations for a long while, and felt the call to help individuals reconcile their sexuality with their justice call or uh, with their religion, with their sense of spirituality, with their sense of God. And I never felt a disconnect between my sexuality and God, even though I was in a Pentecostal church. Um, of knowing that there were other men like me, knowing growing up in the New York City area and New York metropolitan area, I had access to a lot of things about learning who I was and those types of things. You could buy sexual types of things off the newsstand at 15, 16, and go to places that were not carding you at that age. And so there was exploration. And so my call, even though I was called, I knew that I could not be, or I was not, didn't want to be ordained or couldn't be ordained in the church that I was currently in Chicago, and found the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries, found the Church of the Full Covenant first, which went into under the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries, and was ordained there, and did seminary at Chicago Theological, and uh, have been doing work in the UCC Church. I'm the co-president, co-board president of the United Church, the Open and Affirming Coalition of the United Church of Christ. Have been in that position or on the board for about 12 years. And also have served a number of UCC churches, which has the covenant with the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries under Dr. Bishop Yvette Flunder. And also have served with Bishop Carlton Pearson when he was here as his executive pastor, and now are serving at New Start UCC and a fellowship church Gather here with the Midwest Bishop Tindell. So it's helping reconciling people that you are okay, you are a whole being, and you are God's child.
Awesome, awesome. And we're going to come back to that question because you tiptoed into question 2 a little bit, but I want to give Reverend Darlene Franklin an opportunity to tell us who she is and what is her call experience.
Well, what my call experience is now what I call not a calling, but a purpose. I was chosen. And but I was did not grow up in church. I joined a missionary Baptist church after I got out of the military, served in the Air Force, and I'm from New Jersey. And on the day that I was baptized, I heard the call. And I remember saying, God, you must be joking. You are really funny, because you and I both know I'm gay as Christmas. And I am not going to be accepted in this place where I am. And so it was actually during that time in the early 80s or late 80s, right at the height of HIV and AIDS, that my journey began. And I joined Full Truth Fellowship of Christ Church under the Unity Fellowship Church movement at that time. And it was not about, at that time, going to school, seminary, or whatever, because we were saving lives in the city of Detroit. It was about people were coming out of the closet everywhere, and people were being thrown out of churches, and people were dying every week. And so we were there with our feet on the ground. And so my leading to become the pastor of that church was hands-on. And my experience, as I now know it in 2010, I left formal ministry because I felt that what I was seeing was not resonating with what I was parenting, not preaching, but parenting. And it was not bringing about the wholeness and healing of our community. And so I left, and now I went on to become a social worker, and that's how I do ministry. Individually, mental health. I've come to the realization that pastors are not social workers unless formally trained, which is what we have conditioned our community to believe, that we have the anointing and all the gifts and everything. And so it's for me now, it's about purpose and helping people to return to who they are, which is not separate from their spirituality, which is not God looking down on us, but we are spirit and we are, in essence, God. And so that's my path, and it's turning out to be very interesting. And so, as I say, I'm not in formal ministry, but I guess I am.
Awesome. Well, purpose, promise, passion, all of that is intertwined with the call. And from what all of you have described, it's either it was a sense of knowing and yearning from a very young age, or in Reverend Darlene's case, baptism, and heard the voice or a voice call you forth to do something that you had not done before. And so now I wanted us to begin the conversation with describing the call experience, because there are many in the church universal who would think that because we are queer, we have, or we didn't hear God correctly, or we didn't hear source correctly, or we didn't hear spirit correctly. And so to be able to articulate what those experiences were for us is a powerful moment of reconciliation. Now, speaking of reconciliation, let's tiptoe into our next question. You know, how did you come to reconcile your sexuality and spirituality, or was there ever a disconnect to begin with? Who wants to take that question first?
I can answer. This is Reverend Kevin. There was never a disconnect for me. I know that my call is to help others who have had a disconnect, to help them understand that you are a whole being, you are God's child. You, what is for some is not for you. But there is a doctrine, a man-made doctrine, that says and picks and chooses and says that this is who you need to be. But that's not what God said. And so helping individuals understand that, because I never had a disconnect. You know, I would hear different sermons, not so much at my own church, but at other places. And I'm like, that makes no sense. I was not molested. I was not put in any, this was natural. This is who God made me to be. And I need to live into that and understand who I can trust with that information and who I can't trust with that information, who is out to slander me, who is out to harm me. But knowing myself and understanding that there were pitfalls along the way, of course, but understanding that for me was never an issue.
Awesome. And one of the things that there is a song, I should say, that's in the Color Purple, the musical, that I think it's the character Shook sings it, that says, God is inside you and everyone else that was or ever will be. We came into this world with God, and only those who look inside find it, just as sure as my breath is to me. And so to know that a lot of times we come into the world with this knowing, and then we awaken to this humanity side, and we began to discount the knowing that we have, and we began to trust in the 66 books of a canonized Bible instead of trusting that knowing that we have. And so that's a lot of times has derailed many of us to discount what it is that we knew when we came into this world. Anyone else, how did you come to reconcile your sexuality and spirituality?
There was a huge disconnect for me. I accepted my call to lead in ministry at 13, 14, and I was preaching by 16. But along the way, preached that homosexuality was wrong and that homosexuals were going to hell. I didn't come out until age 30. I'm 38 now, so I'm 8 years fresh. So I'm still a newbie in understanding who I am in relationship to my superpower, which is my queerness. But I, now work really hard to spread love and light, because I spent years tearing down the LGBTQ community by, conforming to what church told us that we should do, which was suppress and denounce and, preach against it and all this. And so at age 29, I was laying in bed, depressed, walking depressed, and didn't even know I was depressed. And I heard the voice of the Lord as clearly as you hear me speaking today. And God said, get up and be who I called you to be. Whoever is going to love you will love you, and whoever doesn't just won't. God didn't say get up and be gay. God didn't say get up and be fabulous. God didn't say get up and be queer. God said get up and be who I called you to be. And that's exactly what I'm walking in today. And it was at that moment that I realized I was walking down the path of destruction, because I was denying who the Creator called me to be, but also asking God to undo what God did. God stopped the gayness, but God made it. Why would you insult the divine and tell him to redo his creation? And so in that, I went on trying to figure out, well, am I going to go to hell? And I went to a conference, and I believe Reverend Darlene, you may have been there, maybe not. It was a Just Faith conference put on by the National LGBTQ Task Force. No?
I have no idea.
Okay. Maybe not. But I asked the room full of bishops and imams and Muslim leaders and priests, all queer. And I said, how do you know you're not going to hell? And no one had an answer. I said, oh, no. If I'm going to make this decision, I'm going to make sure I'm not going to hell. So I spent 3 to 4 years doing the research and deconstructing the Bible and understanding how homosexuality got in it and everything. And I realized, oh, this is all a farce. Child, I'm all right. And so are y'all. And so I wrote a book entitled I'm Black, I'm a Minister, and I'm Gay, 7 Reasons Why Living in Your Truth Won't Send You to Hell. And so I had to actually do the research to discover what was the narrative that was the source behind the fuel that led us to believe that we were rejects, mistakes, and going to hell. And I totally tore that argument apart.
Wow. Dr. Kathi.
Yes.
How did you come to reconcile your sexuality and spirituality?
Oh, it's a long story. Well, as I said, I had this relationship with the spirit that I refer to as God since childhood. And so I grew up with this divided view. I came from a very traditional AME family and was in church all my life, hearing all the condemnations and so forth. And it just never really sat well with me. It just never really made sense. It's like, how can this spirit that I know that is me and is in me and has been loving me all my life, how can this tell me that something's wrong with me? I'm going to hell. I believe what's in me more than I believe what you're saying to me. And I grew up feeling that way. And so, yeah, I had my doubts, and and I had to deal with my own. I did the whole thing, was engaged to a man for a minute. Actually, it was the man who said, how come all these funny girls like being around you and you like being around them? I'm like, I don't know. They're comical. I don't know. But I came to understand that who I am and who I love, I did have to just say, you know what? I don't care what other people say. I mean, it really was a conscious decision. I just had to one day decide, I'm not going to be divided anymore. I'm going to stick with the spirit that's in me and the spirit that I've always known. And then what I want to do, and I know I'm created to do, is to help other people learn to live that way. And I had a dream once, and this was another whole level of call, I believe. I had a dream in which all I could see was a person. They had an eye, they had nose, but they had no mouth. And from that dream, I came away thinking, I have to speak to or for people who don't feel like they can speak for themselves. And that's why I couldn't be closeted. I've never worked at a place where I've had to be closeted. I was closeted in church when I was AME, and I was not outside of church. And as you know, Derrick, even when I was AME, I was living behind a glass closet. Everybody knew. And and it was fine. It just wasn't good with the leadership, which is why I left. Because again, I had to decide, do I want to lie to myself? Or do I want to, who was it? Emerson, who said imitation is suicide. Like, do I want to pretend I'm something that I'm not? Or do I want to be? Do I want to exist? Do I want to be who God really created me to be. And so that was my call, not just for myself, but for all those people whose mouths were covered and they couldn't speak for themselves. I needed to be able to speak for them as well, which is what ended up with me founding God, Self, and Neighbor Ministries many years ago, which was one of the earlier churches in the Atlanta area that was for the African American LGBTQ community. A lot of people don't know that, but we were here. I believe we were here either around the same time or before the Unity Fellowship Church was here. And so it was something that I knew I had to do. I had to do that speaking for people who couldn't speak. So
Wow. Is there still a need? Because now we live in a society, we live in a culture where we have young people, especially, who being the trailblazers in this, that are living their truth authentically, seemingly from the time they come out of the womb. There is an awareness that they have, and they're living it and they're walking in it. Is there still a need for us to do the work that we're doing to speak for those who cannot speak?
can I say something real quick? I don't want to monopolize anything, but it's an interesting question. I am going to be 65 this year. And I've been doing this work. I've been doing this work for many years. To tell you the truth, I'm tired. I just have to be honest, but I think my call now is to be a point to encourage these young people that you're talking about. I don't need to be on the front line anymore. I'm too tired. I don't even know the language that the young people are using anymore, so I can't do that. But I need to remind the older people as well that they need to make decisions, political decisions and so forth, to clear the way and to maintain equality, or the equality that we thought we've gained, which people are trying to take away from us. I think it has to be on some level, all hands on deck, but I don't have to be on the front line anymore. I did that, done that. I'm retired from that. But I will encourage people who are doing the work.
Dr. Darlene, I'm anxious to hear what you've got to say, followed by Bishop.
Excuse me? You want me to
I'm
say?
anxious to hear what, yes, please.
I've kind of transcended all of that. And what I'm seeing with young people, I love it, because it's not about coming out. They are understanding that this is about life. This is who I am. I don't necessarily need a label. I don't necessarily. I know who I am as I'm bursting on the scene. And so what they're not accepting from us anymore is to live in fear. Okay, they're not accepting to live in fear. And I have, I go in the stores and people will, when I'm in community, I always felt that, I skipped the whole religious church thing in ministry and went right into LGBT. And I felt that the other coming out for me was, God, you're really funny, because I have children, was married to a man for 10 years, but now I identify and embracing my masculinity, and now I'm embracing my femininity, and now I'm a lesbian, and now I'm too much for me. I'm just life. I'm spirit. So now that I know that I am spirit, made in the image, God's source, spark of God, I step up and I say, I go to the grocery store, I can't preach liberty with my foot in slavery. Mm-hmm. I can't preach liberty in this robe. And when I took my robes off, I realized how unhealed I was. Mm-hmm. And so I had been on a 10-year journey, and now, as they say, I'm the ish, because I take no back seats. And I love these young people because they're not begging. They're not, can you give me? They're not if I suffer, I'll gain. No, I am eternal life. I came from eternal life. And so I am co-creating with spirit my life. Take it or leave it. It is what it is. And so everybody that gets preached to on Sunday, I talk to on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, to help them to see how magnificent and individualized expression that they are of the eternal. You got to stand up and claim who you are. So no, I ain't tired yet. I'm just getting started. I am just getting started. And so it is the spirit that I am. I'm spirit observing humanity. What kind of, I say, come on, God. And people tell me, oh, you're crazy. I say, no, I tell God, what we going to do today? Because I am co-creating with spirit. And so that is why I stepped away from, I could throw up a shingle, but what will that be? Attach me back to old things that had actually are dissipating. We just haven't become aware of it yet. And that is why we're tired. That is why we're tired. So these young people, yes. People are older, people are, even in the LGBT community, you're walking around here with your pants sagging, you walk around. I said, do y'all remember what you looked like when you came out? At least our young people got on underwear.
Well,
come on. I don't want to monopolize the time, but I'm just saying where I am now. You know, so I do know it wasn't about me reconciling my sexuality. Okay, because spirit, when you're spirit and you're operating from spirit, spirit is sexual.
Ooh.
Spirit is sexual. So I'm gonna wait till you ask the questions.
Oh, okay, so well, there is a very thin divide. It's very thinly veiled between sexuality and spirituality. There is I would say they're very fluid and one and the same. Mm-hmm. And so we don't want to talk about that in the church universal, but there is no divide between the secular and the sacred.
Mm-hmm.
No, it isn't.
You're right.
No, it isn't. No, it isn't.
Nope, you're right.
It's how can I live and move and have my being in the omnipotent, omnipresent, and whatever the other one is, and be divided and be separate. No, right. Everything, I'm looking at God in all of God's individualized expression. So how can I build an institution and say you can't be included? How can I do that? How can I say that I'm hearing from God and all of a sudden now I have conditioned you to believe in hell, and now I come on TV with my pointed hat and say there is no hell. See, this is what I deal with in mental health spaces, one-on-one. People living in fear, and they are disconnected and out of alignment with the spirit of who we are. And I'm tired of it. I am so tired of it because I see the brokenness and I see creation running from itself, running from the devil with the keys of the kingdom.
Wow.
It's time. It's just time. It's just time to stop it. So I left it.
So Bishop, how do we address where we are as a community of faith, as a culture, relative to speaking the truth? Because now we've tiptoed over into not just religious culture, but now into spirituality. What do we do? Where do we go? And how do we lead the youth relative to this new frontier, if you will, that is, I don't want to say post church or post religious institution, but that's where we're headed. That's where we're going. That spirit, that we're now in this age of spirit and the age of Aquarius. How do we lead?
Yeah, thanks for that, Kevin. And I don't know that we're the ones to answer that question, because the world that we received, we have recreated in our own image and have now set it up for emerging and future generations to receive. So I don't know that we're the ones who can really answer that question. I do, though, think about this in terms of the reality that I was born in August of 1970, which was 2 years and 4 months after the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And I grew up in North Alabama, just a mere 70 miles north of Birmingham. But I had to be good and grown and on the other side of the country before I realized how close my life and physical address was to the epicenter of the civil rights movement. So those who came before me and those who were instrumental in rearing me did very little to talk to me about that struggle, to share those actual tools, and to do that at home, community-based education that any Black person, any person of color in the world, now we can't just say in the United States, but if we watch what's happening, any person who's not white anywhere in the world needs, did not happen for me at home. It happened on the other side of the country. And I name it this way because I think it's important for those who have been in the struggle, those who have been leading the way to, as Dr. Kathi said, it's time to just let it go, let somebody else lead it, but stay involved. I really believe that's where I am, right? And it's the sense of I need to stay involved in the work, and I need to share my story. I need to hear your stories. We need to hear each other's stories, because that's a big part of the education, and not just the bad parts of it, but those parts where we found empowerment, where we were able to capture our voice, where we were able to build community and strengthen one another, to talk about the wins and the gains as much as or more than the losses, but to bring that voice of education and encouragement, I think is the best thing we can do, so that those emerging and future generations will know that there was something before what we have now. And I think they need that, so that as they see inklings of it coming back again, because it will, they'll know what it is because they've been told and they've been shown the way.
Yeah, NDRE puts it like this: if young people would talk to old people, it'll make us a better people all around. We're not transmitting the values. It's generational nihilism, for lack of a better term, that we're not transmitting those stories, those values, and whatnot. And I think even though these kids have come here with the strongest sense of knowing than we ever possibly thought was imaginable, we've still got to do our jobs as the elders in the community to give them an understanding of what has come before them. And like you said, Bishop Cedrick, just so that they'll know what to look for when they see that ugly monster of inequality and homophobia rearing its head, they'll know how to respond to it. Awesome. Anybody else want to add anything on that? That awesome. All right, so let's slide on into our next question. And you kind of tiptoed on it, but all of you all have, relative to the civil rights movement. Where is the position? Where does the Black church stand when it comes to civil rights in today's society? Is the Black church still a leader in this movement, or has the church abdicated its responsibility? We know that LGBTQ people, and I'm speaking specifically of Bayard Rustin, were marginalized during the actual civil rights movement of the 1960s. Where the Black church was a leader in that movement. But where is the church now? And has the church abdicated its responsibility? I'll start with Benjamin here.
I don't think the church necessarily abdicated its responsibility. It just lost its influence. There's a huge lack of respect for the hypocrisy of church mainstream. In the recent uprising of 2020, there were folks like myself, queer pastors leading the uprising across the country. I led 20 and 30,000 people in LA. You didn't see the Black church. You didn't see the NAACP. You didn't see the Urban League. You didn't see all of these institutional organizations that led in the fight. So no one's looking to the Black church anymore for answers. No one's looking for resolve. We're actually running from the Black church because of all the discrimination that comes from the Black church. I actually was at a service in Atlanta a couple of months ago, and Jamal Bryant was on stage with Bishop O.C. Allen, and Jamal said that he, one, apologized for how the Black church treated the LGBTQ community, but then acknowledged the heinous acts that happen from the pulpit every Sunday. And so the church no longer, especially the Black church, no longer has the influence and the power. And some of our major metropolitans, yes, when politicians want to run for office, they go to the Black church, but that's about it. I don't see them moving anything on Capitol Hill. I don't see them moving anything in state houses. And, you know, when it comes to things that matter to people, you don't see the church. Abortion, you don't see the church. LGBTQ rights, you don't see the church. Gun violence, you don't see the church. It's like the things that matter. Kids, I'm not even in America at the moment, but I just tapped into the news, and on the first day back to school, there's a school shooting. Where's the church? You didn't hear from any of the bishops, but you talk about homosexuality, you hear from the church. And so it doesn't have a voice anymore, in my opinion, but I also believe the stats speak as well.
Wow. Reverend Tindell, what are your thoughts?
I think the Black church is at a crossroads and they're trying to hang on, pushing the fear button, follow me or go to hell, follow the church or go to hell, follow the doctrine or go to hell. And so they're still, preaching that message. And so as the young people are not receiving that message as such, they're looking to other ways or other organizations, as Benjamin said, to forward the justice call. When I was doing the right to marry campaign here for the religious community here in Illinois, oh, God, you could count on one hand how many Black churches were supporting it, of course. And pushing that agenda, even one individual who was leading a prominent church here had to step back because his board said that he was getting too deep in the fight. And it was a fight that supported a lot of his members, a ton of his members. But because of what the church stood for, or because, and this was the UCC church, but a Black UCC church. And so, we have to look at it. I mean, my children are now 33, 28, 24. They have no sense of, they don't have a sense of, having to support the Black church. They have a sense of supporting their spirituality, which we gave to them, but they don't have a sense of supporting the Black church as it stands, because the Black church is not on the forefront, as Benjamin said, of these issues anymore. They're not speaking out. They're not. There's a fear that they're going to lose members, lose finances, lose their stature or their mythical stature as being the pillar of the community. They're not the community centers anymore that they once were. They're not the bastions of justice that they once were, in my opinion.
Bishop, as a member of a of a mainstream denomination. What are your thoughts?
You know, it's interesting. I was been wrestling with this for quite some time, but like the denomination I'm a part of is 92.5% white in the U.S. And it's the church of my birth and my baptism. Now, though good part of my upbringing was in that good old Southern missionary Baptist church across the road with my grandparents. However, I'm the person who questions, what do we mean when we say the Black church? Do we mean a series of Black churches where, or congregations where Black folks get, like, what do we mean? And I've been wrestling with that a lot. I know I've been on several panels with my brother Benjamin over the last 3 or 4 years. And this conversation around the Black church and its relevance and its efficacy continues to be a topic of interest to some people. And each time I prep for those conversations and walk away from them, I still leave with the question of, what are we talking about when we say the Black church? And then I sit down and I watch the PBS special. I don't even remember how long ago it came out, but it ran again over the weekend, the Skip Gates Black church special. And just going back to sort of the founding of this country and moving forward, there's been this institution or these institutions that make up what we, I think, are referring to when we talk about the Black church. But even when we talk about the civil rights movement and we just make the blanket statement that the Black church was the cornerstone of the civil rights movement, that's not accurate. There were some leaders within Black churches who came together to provide significant and much needed leadership. But even in that PBS documentary, though I don't take it all as gospel, I think it's substantiated by my own lived experience that many Black folk and Black churches in particular hid during the height of the movement out of fear, the same way that many of us have had to hide out of fear in our own present day context. So for me, I think a healthy conversation at some point by somebody to really unpack, untwine, and define what we mean when we say Black church now as opposed to then, and even as we look forward to think about what it or its may be as we evolve. And
that's definitely another conversation that we're definitely going to have. Dr. Reverend Darlene, I saw you chuckle over there with Bishop made the comment. What are your thoughts?
I think this concept of the Black church has to accept that it's evolving. We have to accept evolution. We have to accept that. I think that the Black church has to come out of the closet of hypocrisy. Because you cannot, the things, I've asked myself the same question, Bishop. What is the Black church? What is it nowadays? What really is it? It's upset about Tyler Perry. It's upset about Beyonce. What? I don't even what. And so it's this institution of. I heard this morning, I said, well, the Black church is the new face of slavery. Mm. When I saw Greenleaf and I saw the priest with the Bible leading the Black Africans, you ever watch that introduction, leading the Africans with the chains around their neck? That is what we are a part of. You cannot pour this new message of freedom into old wineskin. It's not going to work. And we're trying to mix it up and come out with a liberated message that is going to be healthy, and it's not going to work. It has to evolve. It has to recognize that it was good at one place in time. Sometimes I envy that I did not was not a part of when everything was the big choirs and the, and all of that. I didn't grow up in that, but there are people that is dear to. But that was for a specific time for us to become aware of the power that we have within us. And so to me, the building of the concrete sits in the middle of the neighborhoods as this beautiful edifice, but look at what's around it. Burnt out buildings. And the only time that people can be close to God, not in their communities, but when we step in that building. And we get all hyped up, and then when we leave that building, we're right back in war-torn neighborhoods, communities, death, dying. What is it? So what is the Black church? What is the purpose of it? And to me, the Black church lost something when it accepted faith-based money. Because it's owned. It's owned. Well, and so you can only say so much. That's been my experience. You can only say so much. You can only be involved in so much.
Tied our hands a little bit, huh? Dr. Kathi, I'll give you the last word on this segment.
All right. Well, I have to go back to that question as well. What are we talking about when we say the Black church? Being one who grew up in the African Methodist Episcopal Church, which should have been a church of liberation, which was not. I'll have to, it was interesting to me that being part of that denomination at that time, I'm not saying this is all Black, all AME churches, but being part of a Black denomination at that time, was not creating a space for me as an LGBTQ person. It wasn't really creating a space for me as a woman. It wasn't affirming who I am and making room for who I am. And it was not until I left the African Methodist Episcopal Church and landed in a predominantly white UCC denomination at that time that I felt free enough, first of all, to be myself, was embraced as a woman and a leader, and was in a space where I felt like I could be honest. And so my call now is, or my hope now for the Black church, whatever that is, I try to have conversations with Black pastors individually. I think things change individually to help people see there's more to what you're saying and what you're doing. And my thing with church in general, and this will be really my last thing, my thing with church in general, if you're saying you're a Christian church, which is where I came from, Christianity, if you're saying you're a Christian church, then be a follower of Jesus. Be a follower of one who wasn't doing all of this, I don't know, this condemnation and so forth. Be about love, be about justice, be about what you say your name is. And so that's my thing now, is to remind people. When I created churches that were predominantly for LGBTQ persons, I had problems because they wanted me to create what they left.
Come on now.
And my thing is, I'm not going to create what you left, because if it were up to me, I would lead everybody out of most of the churches that I know, because I would like to lead them to a place of freedom and introduce them to the Jesus that they say that they're trying to follow. And this just, I'm sorry, why did you have to call on me to talk about this? If this is one of my hot pop buttons, because Jesus was a spirit person. Jesus wasn't about all the dogma and all of that. And so, I'd like to say, if I could lead the Black church and all churches back to what they say they stand for, that would be what I'd like to see. And I know that's Pollyanna-ish, but I think we have to hang on to some of those kind of visions.
Well, I think that, again, to Dr. Kathi, to your point, we they get the church gets Paul mixed up with Jesus,
Hmm. Yes.
and Jesus didn't say all of that. Paul said it,
Hmm.
and we need to free ourselves and understand, as you said, the message of Jesus and who Jesus was, if we are a true Christian, and not what Paul was doing, uh, what he was doing, and what he said.
Hmm.
And that gets us into a lot of trouble.
Yeah. And a lot of times we don't understand what Paul said either. I think we give Paul
Exactly.
a bad rap sometime because we don't understand what he was really saying either. But
Sure.
but yeah, I agree with you.
I think we also need to understand that Jesus didn't belong to Christianity.
Exactly.
Christianity hijacked Jesus.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so,
Exactly.
Exactly.
I think we need to really dig deep in that. Jesus is my, I've been accused of not being a Christian. You're right, I'm not. But Jesus is my best friend.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
because he came here to show us an example on who we are. And
Mhm.
so I think that really needs to be said. And I also think that a lot of LGBTQ churches have mimicked the places where we were uh, um, uh, conditioned. They followed right along with that, and
It's a different type of
we
oppression.
exactly. And so we have to admit, as a one of my mentors said to me, the church didn't hurt you. You were hurt before you even stepped foot in the church. And that's a whole
Amen.
story about how we need to look within our Black communities and families and acknowledge the things that have happened to us in there, specifically where no white person ever was. So that's a whole another thing for me.
I thought my comment was going to go too far, but Reverend Darlene, you just opened the way for it. I'm actually away working on my second book called Love Interrupted, and it's about finding out who we were before they told us who we should be. Who were we before the Roman Catholic Church told us who we should be?
Mhm.
And so the whole institution, for lack of being eloquent in my words, just needs to be blown up because we've been disconnected from who we are at our core as human beings, but who we are as Afrocentric people. And so the church was established by white men. The Black church was established by slave masters. And so we are just like if we want real freedom in the United States, we got to blow up a lot of the systems that govern this country. We have to blow up the systems that govern our connection with the divine because they're very much oppressive, very much man-centered and man-serving. And so, most people, most Black people, most Black preachers don't even know the history behind the church, history behind the Black church, history behind anything. But we have jumped right into the flow of continual oppression. And so, before I even talk about homosexuality in the church with leaders, I say we got to take that white Jesus off the wall. You don't even know who this white Jesus was painted after. This is not Jesus. This is not the divine. And there's so much that needs to be deconstructed before we can even talk about sexuality and spirituality. Because the core, our foundation is poisoned. Our foundation was scripted. We've been told how to be, how to act, how to relate to the divine because it disconnects us from our true power. If you can get somebody's mind and disrupt their power, you can control them. And that's what's been happening for hundreds of years.
And with that comment, we're going to stop right there because we have reached that hour. This is so powerful. I want to continue. I want to go on. And I want to invite each of you back because I would love to continue the conversation of the myth of the Black church, deconstructing that myth and defining, as you all have said, what is the Black church? And what is it that we're doing or not doing? So again, I want to say thank you all so very much for taking out some time out of your busy schedules to come and have this conversation with me. And I really, really, really will check with you all because I really want us to continue this because it is a conversation that is long overdue. If we're not careful, and this is going back to the comments that you all said, when it comes to a lot of LGBTQ ministries and churches, we have recreated the bondage that we've come out of. Paulo Freire said it this way: the oppressed will become the oppressors, because we are indeed mimicking what it is that we were taught. And so we've got to, as Benjamin said, deconstruct this whole notion of how we connect with the divine, and know that the divine starts within each one of us. Mm-hmm. Thank you all so very much for your time. And I hope to see you on the next Black, Queer, and Called conversation.